Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much to all of the organizers of this for organizing this conference. I would have preferred to be really in Bonn, but especially during this semester, these 3 last months. But okay, it's life. So I will speak today about joint work with Benjamin Dadoun, Mathieu Fratellisi, and Pierre-André Zitt, which are all in our new university Gustave Eiffel. Now we change of name. It's not anymore Marne-la-Vallée. So I want to speak on the unit ball of asymptotics of the geometry of the unit ball of Schatten classes. So let me briefly describe what I call Schatten classes as usual. So I have a field F, which can be the real space, the complex space, or even the quaternionic numbers. Okay, and you take the set of matrices n cross n equipped with the Euclidean structure, Hilbert-Schmidt norm, as usual, the trace of T star T. And for any matrix with coefficient in this numbered space, quaternionic, complex, or real space, you define the sequence of singular values of T star T to the power 1/2 that you can put in decreasing order if you prefer or not. It's not very important for the talk. I will also study the subspace, certain category of subspaces of matrices, which is a space of, say, for example, if you are in the real case of symmetric matrices. In the complex case, I will study Hermitian matrices or anti-Hermitian or skew Hermitians. I mean, you can play a little bit in all these situations. The important fact is that each time you may define, in fact, directly the eigenvalues of the matrix T, in fact, instead of taking the singular values. Okay, so this in random matrix theory, it is called classical ensemble, and it is clearly described, for example, in the book of Meta and things like that. So what are now the unit ball of the Schatten classes? It is so your matrix T is said to belong to this unit ball of the Schatten class. So whatever the matrix satisfied of kind of symmetry or not, if and only if the LP norm of the singular values is smaller than 1, or the LP norm of the eigenvalues is smaller than 1. Okay, this is the unit ball of the Schatten class that I will study today. So what is the goal of my talk? It is to study classical geometric parameters associated to this unit ball here. Okay, so this parameter, I will call it IQ of this convex body. And this is 1 over the volume of this convex body to the 1 over d times the LQ norm of the Hilbert-Schmidt operator norm of T. Okay, so this bar here, these things means that it is a normalized integral, so that this lambda T is just the Lebesgue probability measure on this set on this convex body here. Okay, and there is well-known various conjecture related to this object. So the first one, the oldest one, is a hyperplane conjecture, saying that you can find a universal constant C, so that for any, you see here my dimension, I call it always D in this talk, because D, I am working in the set of matrices n cross n. So D is in the simplest case is n squared or something like that. So this is why I wanted to give another name than usual. So the dimension is D, and for any symmetric convex body, you ask if the isotropic constant is bounded by a universal constant C, where this isotropic constant is defined as usual by like this, by square root the dimension times LK. It is you minimize the following problem. So 1 over volume of K to 1 over D, you take the L2 norm of the norm of X with respect to an ellipsoid, here E, and you minimize this over all ellipsoid having the same volume than the unit Euclidean ball. Okay, And this is the quantity that is usually called I2 of K and E here, okay? And what is geometrically the isotropic position associated to K? It is when this infimum is attained for E equals exactly the unit Euclidean ball, the classical one. Okay, so this is what is called isotropic position. But you see that this isotropic position here, this quantity is totally invariant under transformation of K. So in fact, you do not fix, you just say that the inertia matrix is a multiple of the identity here. So geometrically, historically, the volume of K was chosen to be equal to 1, and LK was the operator norm of the covariance matrix, while nowadays it is more common to say that K is in isotropic position, where when the isotropic matrix associated to K is the identity. This is these two conditions that are written here, and in this case, you can see that the isotropic constant is nothing else than 1 over volume of K to the 1 over D in this situation. So the question of the hyperplane conjecture is, can you upper bound it universally the 1 over the volume of K to the 1 over D when K is in isotropic position? And it is still unknown. A more recent conjecture, but still from 1995, of Cannan, Lovász, and Szymonowic, is related a little bit with what Emmanuel presented previous talk, so it is about Poincaré inequality. So you want to find a universal constant C here, so that in any dimension, for any isotropic symmetric convex body in RD, for any regular function, you have a Poincaré inequality, which is exactly what Emmanuel talked a little bit about the variance of f is smaller than this universal constant times the normalized integral of gradient f squared dx. Okay, in the talk of Emmanuel, I wanted to ask a question about the diameter, if you can replace it by something else like shear, like in this question of Cannan, Lovász, and Szymonowic, but we didn't have time. I will discuss after. So you can see that of this conjecture, I always love to study weaker forms of this conjecture, which is the first weaker form is the thin shell conjecture. Here, you just play a little game. You take f of x equal to the Euclidean norm, okay, and here the gradient of f, Euclidean norm of the gradient of f is of course equal to 1, and you see that this inequality becomes, this question becomes, can you bound the variance of the Euclidean norm by a universal constant C? Okay, for the variance conjecture, you take f of x equals the Euclidean norm square. So if you plug inside this inequality, you see that the question is equivalent to bound the variance of the Euclidean norm square by C times the secant moment of the Euclidean norm on the convex body. And if you play a little bit more on this was observed in the thesis of Bruno Fleury, something like more than 10 years ago. You can see that Cannan, Lovász, Szymonowic questions conjecture implies the following behavior of this IQ quantities that I defined before. But what is important here, it is that it is valid for any q smaller than c times square root the dimension. Okay, and you have you can control the how IQ is growing with respect to I2 with a growth which goes like q divided by d here. Okay, so already for q equal 4, it gives exactly the variance conjecture with something constant divided by d. This is exactly what will tell the variance conjecture. But this behavior is still valid for any q smaller than c times square root of d. Okay. So some historical comments about these questions, maybe. So first of all, it is not the good order, but at least it is historically for the unit balls of the Shatton class, the isotropic constant. It is already known that the isotropic constant is uniformly bounded. What I mean by uniformly, it's for every dimension, for every n. Okay, you give me p, and for every n, the isotropic constant of the unit ball of SPN is bounded by a constant. Okay, and this was done in a very nice paper by Koenig, Meyer, and Pajor in '98. In the general case of convex body in isotropic position, the first non-trivial bond of variance of the Euclidean norm appear in two papers. So the main paper is of Boas-Clartak in 2007 about central limit theorem for convex sets. But at the same moment, we had also another proof of the same type of inequality, and that we published with Bruno Fleury and Grigoris Pauris, and at the same moment. And of course, you see here the variance of the Euclidean norm. The trivial bond is that it is bounded by the average of the Euclidean norm square. And in isotropic position, average of the Euclidean norm square is of the order of the dimension. So the trivial bond is C times the dimension. But we don't want to see dimension here. You want to see something which goes to zero, which goes to infinity slower than the dimension. And we got, in this type of paper, we got a behavior of the order of I don't know, but d divided by log d to some power, something like that, but which goes slightly slower to infinity than d itself. Okay, so after that, there was a lot of works, and very, very nice paper appear in 2013 by Ronen Eldan, who proved that thin shell, so thin shell, remember, it is this inequality for the variance, implies, in fact, spectral gap up to polylog, which means that if you have, if you have thin shell here, you may prove Cannon-Lovász-Szymonovitz inequality with some polylog factor here in this constant C here, polylog of the dimension. Okay, while slightly after, Lee and Vempala, using the same stochastic localization method that was developed by Ronen Eldan, proved that Poincaré inequality holds true with a constant depending on the dimension, with this constant being of the order of d to the 1/4, so much slower than what was expected. And in fact, I didn't write all the references. It is the number of works are huge in this area. But for example, it was known that this bond implies that the isotropic constant is bounded also by d to the 1/4. This was some work of Eldan and Clartak about the relation between Poincaré inequality or thin shell and the hyperplane conjecture. And this was for me very surprising that these two questions are finally related. But this is the case, and this is very nice. And very recently, Yuan C. Chen managed to use a bootstrap argument in this approach of Lee and Vempala to prove that, in fact, this constant C of d is in fact smaller than exponential square root log of the dimension, which means that it goes, it maybe goes to infinity with the dimension, but slower than any power of d. Okay, so this is the main breakthrough in this theory, which gives here in all this result about the isotropic constant and so on. We already know that they are bounded by any power of the dimension that you would like. In fact, bounded by e to the square root log d. Okay, so up to nowadays, I mean, I think that a lot of people who believe that the Cannon-Lovász-Szymonovitz conjecture holds true. So now we want really to get something constant not depending on the dimension at all in all the results. So now let me come back to the special case of the unit ball of Schatten classes. So I said already that Koenig, Meyer, and Pajor proved that the isotropic constant is bounded. Isotropic constant, it is proving that I2 of this B of SPN intersected with E is bounded by C square root of the dimension. Okay, so this is the result of Koenig, Meyer, and Pajor, and of course it is of the order. Okay, this is of the order of C square root of D. In 2007 with Grigoris Paouris, we proved that in fact for any Q smaller than square root of the dimension, you have also that IQ, which is the quantity of interest in this talk. This IQ are of the order again of square root of D, but for any Q going also up to square root of D, up to square root of the dimension. And in fact, we have a result which is slightly better, but I didn't want to enter in details here. So there is some dependence on P here. You can go slightly above square root of D, which gives better concentration inequality. But I just wanted to recall this result because we will need it at some point. And Radke and Vritziu alone in 2016 and 18 studied the variance conjecture for the SPN, tried to make the computation, and managed to prove that the variance conjecture holds true for P equal infinity. P equal infinity, it means that you work in S infinity N, which is the space of matrices equipped with the operator no. Okay, this is S infinity N, and they prove that the variance conjecture holds true here. And but if I remember well, they work at least in the last paper of Beatrice Vritziu. She worked in the case of symmetric matrices, not in full generality, but you will see why. I will explain the proof, and you will see the details of all of this and why it appears. But okay, it holds true for S infinity. So our goal now was to fix P and to study this question when for a fixed number P. So in fact, we proved some results. I want to spend some time, and please ask me questions if you do not follow me. So the first theorem that we proved is the following: you fixed the number P. P is a finite number between 1 and infinity. E is whatever classical ensemble of matrices, well, the ensemble that you prefer to work with. Okay, then you can find a real number that depends on P and E, okay, just of this, such that not only IQ is bounded by a constant times square root of D, but in fact, you can precisely compute the value of the limit when n goes to infinity of this quantity here, 1 over square root of D times IQ. Okay, so the results that we had, for example, with Paouris, tells that these quantity are bounded, okay, for fixed Q. But in fact, here, of course, they are bounded because the limit exists already. And the limit it can be really evaluated and computed. And I will try to explain why we can compute precisely this limit. And this is, I believe, very nice to be able to make this computation. And the second theorem, once you are able to do this, you see, you remember, the question of Cannan-Lovász and Simonovic can be written, for example, as I4 divided by I2 smaller than 1 plus C over D. If in this quantity you let D goes to infinity, you prove that the limit of I4 divided by I2 is equal to 1, of course. And now that you know that I2 has a limit, or not, you know that, and so this fact is in fact not very surprising that they have a limit for every fixed Q, that the limit is the same. But we wanted to study how does behave the quotient IQ divided by I2 minus 1. And in fact, we managed to prove that, again, this limit exists. So maybe I didn't say what is D, but at least it is written. D is the dimension of my space here. So this limit of D times IQ divided by I2 minus 1, again, exists and has a precise value that you can compute, that you can define exactly, which is this one. Unfortunately, we are able only to do it in the set of symmetric matrices or complex Hermitian or symplectic Hermitian or whatever you want, but in the space where your matrix has from the very beginning eigenvalues, in fact, where you do not work with singular values, but you work with the eigenvalues of the matrix. And the second restriction that we have is the following that you can see here, that is valid for any SPN, but P has to be, it can be 4, and it has to be larger than 6. So I hope that I will be able to explain why we have such restriction at the end on the result, but this is what we proved. So at what time should I finish? 3:30 or 3:20?
Yes.
3:30? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what are the tools for the proof of this result? The first step is the same as in the book of Yes, in the book of Anderson, Guillonnet, and Zeitouni, and this is that was developed, for example, in the very nice paper of Jean Saint-Raymond, who studied the volumes of this unit Euclidean, of this unit balls of Chatan classes, who proposed a very nice formula for the volumes. And it was also used in the paper of Koenig, Meyer, and Pajor, and of myself with Grigoris. So this is the following. When you compute the integral over the unit Euclidean, the unit Chatan class ball, SPN, okay, so this unit ball, if you take a function of the singular values, so when you take function of the singular values, you want this function to be symmetric, which do not depend on the order of the coordinate, okay, and on the sign also. So your function is symmetric, okay. Then you have a constant here, Cn. In fact, this Cn depends also on E, in fact, on the set E, but just on this, okay? It doesn't depend on P. This is important. And times an integral, you can reduce to an integral over Bpn of your function, your origin symmetric function, times a certain density here. And this density that appear is exactly what I wrote here below, is the product of xi to the a minus xj to the a to power b, product of xi to power c, where b here, the b here that appear is always, in fact, the dimension of your field, the R dimension of your field. So it is 1 for if you work on the real space of matrices. It is 2 if you work on the complex matrices. It is 4 if you work in the Hermitian, in the I forgot the name. Okay, I lost the name.
Quaternion.
Quaternion. Thank you, Gideon. Quaternionic matrix. A is equal to 2. You see A is equal to 2 when you work in your set of matrices on which you have to define the singular values, because in fact with singular values you work with T star T to the power 1/2. So it is natural to see a dependence of xi square minus xg square in these things, while A is equal to 1 when you work in the set of matrices on which you know that they have eigenvalues. So in this case, it is xi, product of xi minus xj, because it is directly the eigenvalues of the matrix that appear here. And C here, if I remember well, C, I think it is 0 and 1. It depends on the set. Okay, I will not explain why you have some difference, but sometimes you have C here, sometimes you do not have. Okay, so now you understand something very fast. Of course, if P is equal to infinity, here you arrive to an integral over a product measure over B infinity. So here you are already in an integral over a product measure, and you want to study some inequalities, the behavior of this when you have a product measure on B infinity, which is weighted by this log concave function. Okay, and you want to understand some type of Poincaré inequality or things like that for this type of measure. When you are on BPN, you are not in such situations. And as usual, we use this classical trick in convexity to replace the integral over BPN by an integral over Rn now, okay, with a weight, which is you can choose whatever you want. You can put exponential minus the LP norm to power P. You can put exponential minus the LP norm to whatever power you want. You can make a constant here. So we realize that in fact in the paper with Grigoris, maybe we didn't use a good normalization that he used more generally in book like Anderson, Guillonnet, and Zeitouni, and so on like that. I will tell you slightly later about large deviation principle, and for large deviation principle, it is more natural to have this n times the sum of xi to the p here. Okay, but here, when you do such change of variable here, you need a property of your function capital F. You need a property that the function f is homogeneous of degree k here, so that when you do this trick here, you will receive a gamma function here, which depends on the degree of homogeneity of your function f, gamma of 1 plus dimension plus k divided by p. Okay, so you do this trick, and you arrive with a very big formula with a lot of quantities that you want to evaluate. And so now you see that this density here is the same as the density that I wrote here, okay, that I wrote about FNP, that I called FNP here. FNP of X is, I normalized so that it is a probability density by 1 over ZNP, and times, do you see my mouse when I say this?
Yes, yes.
Very good. I prefer because okay, so exponential minus bn times the sum of xi to the p, plus if I rewrite what is fabc, it is exactly b times the sum of log of xi to the a minus xj to the a, plus c times the sum of the log of xi. Okay, so when you look at the first consequence of this, you get a very nice and precise formula about the volumes of these unit balls of the Schatten classes, which is this coefficient n to power d over p. Okay, this constant Cn that it is written in the book what it is, and you can precisely evaluate it and compute it, divided by this gamma function times this normalization factor Znp, which is nothing else than the integral over Rn of, if you erase this and take just the exponential. Okay, and what opened my eyes on this theory of large deviation principle, it is a recent number of work. I just quoted Kablushko, Prochnow, and Taylor, but in fact there are several people, Nina Gantert, Kavita Ramanan, David Alonso, who worked a lot to study large deviation principle on this with this type of measure by taking random points uniformly distributed on the unit ball of the Schatten class, and they may prove very nice result, but they have one paper where they studied exactly the asymptotics, so the limit when n goes to infinity of this volume here. Okay, and in fact, the link with potential theory or logarithmic potential theory was already present, in fact, in the work of Saint-Rémond, and this is what I would like to enlighten now. So let me fix a little bit one parameter, A. I will fix A to be equal to 1, which means that I'm just working in the set of symmetric matrices or Hermitian, just with when the matrices have already eigenvalues. Okay, it works also for A equal 2, but I want to present it just in this case, it is simpler. So you have now you write your density with like this, with such Hamiltonian H and P. So this is exactly, I just rewrite here the definition of F and P from the previous slide. Okay, but just with a normalization, which is more common in large deviation principle or logarithmic potential. And what is behind this theory is to observe that this Hamiltonian, you define the following potential IP of mu, which is 2 integral of absolute value of x to power p d mu minus double integral when x is different than y of log of x minus y d mu of y. So be careful, x now they are not in Rn as before, they are in R here. Okay, and this potential is close to the Hamiltonian, provided that the measure mu is close to the empirical measure defined like this, when ln of x to be 1 over n times the sum of the Dirac measure on the point xi. Okay, so you have your vector x. So x here was very bad notation for x here. Okay, but x is x1, xn. It is distributed following the measure of density FNP. Okay, and you look at this random empirical measure ln of x, 1 over n times the sum of the Dirac of xi. Okay, and the theory of large deviation principle tells that, in fact, under this measure, this empirical measure, Ln, this random empirical measure, concentrates when n goes to infinity around the probability measure that minimize the functional IP that I defined here. Okay, so let me write the precise result that we know here from this potential theory. Let me say. So this is a theorem that you can extract from the book of Saf and Totik, and from a very important work on this random random matrix theory of Johansson, that there exists a unique measure minimizing the functional IP. This measure is compactly supported on R. You know exactly the support of this measure. This measure is absolutely continuous with respect to the Lebesgue measure. You know the density. It is called P-Ullmann density, in fact, and you can precisely compute the value of IP of this measure mu p. Okay, and then so once you know all of this, once you have established this, then the main result is the following: is that almost surely, with respect to FNP, of course, with respect to this measure of density FNP, this empirical measure converges weakly to the measure mu p. So this means that for any continuous bounded function, the limit when on plus infinity of ln scalar f equal mu p scalar f, of course, almost surely. Okay, almost surely with respect to FNP. Okay, so this is a very important paper of Johansson, which is called Eigenvalues of Random Hermitian Matrices, where in fact he proved exactly this inequality. And I made several mistakes using this inequality, but this is really something that from which you can deduce this weak convergence and not more, at least for me, for the moment, I'm not able to deduce something more important out of this. But on the way of proving this, in fact, you can see that they established that the limit on plus infinity of this normalization factor to power 1 over d is exactly this value of the minimum of the potential here. So which means that in fact they established exactly the limit of the volume of the Euclidean of the unit Schatten classes to power 1 over d, because I recall, sorry, where is it? It is here that the volume to power 1 over d, you have exactly here, you know everything power 1 over d, and here it remains just this quantity power 1 over d to evaluate, and this is done in this theorem. Okay, but now let me rewrite the quantities that are of interest for us in terms of this empirical, random empirical measure. In fact, you can, okay, this is tedious computation, but it is important. If you rewrite the average of the Hilbert-Schmidt norm of t to the power of 1 over q, if you use this trick from convexity that I described before, you arrive to a quantity which is that you can write exactly like this, in fact. So maybe again, I will underline. So this here, okay. It is exactly here, you see, this is the Euclidean norm to power q, but I change a little bit the normalization by 1 over n. I put the n somewhere else and so on. And just to understand this quantity as something related with this random empirical measure here, okay? And my function psi here is obviously just t squared, okay? Because ln of x scalar psi is exactly the sum of xi squared, okay? It is exactly the sum of xi squared. This is 1 over n times the sum of xi squared. So psi is just a function on R, which is defined by t squared. So if you want to use weak convergence of this to mu p scalar f, okay? You want to use a dominated convergence and then to deduce that, okay, this limit exists. But you faced two problems. The first one is that psi is not bounded here. This is the function is t squared here, so it is not bounded on R, so you cannot use it directly. The result, you have to truncate. And the second problem is also that even to use this, you need a slightly better bond on the moment to get some kind of uniformity on n. But in fact, bonded to have something bonded uniformly on n. But you see that this question of being bonded uniformly on n, it is related to the, in fact, to the proof of the fact that the isotropic constant of SPN was bonded. It is exactly the same question. To have an upper bound uniformly on n of everything, it is just the same proof than the proof of this of the fact that isotropic constant was bonded. And here, to be able to prove this, we need slightly better bond that the isotropic constant is bonded, which is the following, which is here, maybe now nobody sees, but here what is written is nothing else than 1 over n times sum of what? Of xi to power r. Okay, this is ln scalar xi to the r. So xi to the r, so it is 2r. Okay, xi is t squared, so this is 2r. So of course, this measure with respect to each xi, it is invariant. So all of them are equal. So this is nothing else than xi to the 2r. Okay, and the isotropic constant was related to the study of the quantity average of xi squared. Here we need slightly better bond. We need something with power 2r here, and to have such nice behavior here. So each time when you see the result, I believe you do not feel where is the dependence on the dimension, but it is very important to just have constant 2 power r over p. And our result is that this is valid for any r smaller than Cn. So maybe one more minute. Maybe one more minute.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Just to let me explain the proof of theorem 2. Okay, for the proof of theorem 2, you see in the proof of theorem 1, it was just related with the convergence of this quantity to 0, in fact. Okay, while we need to understand in the proof of theorem 2, the asymptotics of when you renormalize it by n times this quantity. You need to understand how these behave and where it follows. So when you do some computation of this, when you rewrite everything correctly, you see that you need to understand the behavior of n squared times the q over 2 power of ln scalar c. You take the average 1 over q minus this. Okay, here you have n squared. Okay, but here you take the difference of 2 terms on which you know that all of them that converge to the same thing. So there is recent work important in this theory of logarithmic potential of Beckermann, Leblé, and Serfati, and of Lambert, Ledoux, and Webb, where they managed to make this study. And just in the case when C equals 0, I equal 1, A equal 1, B is whatever you want. And the main result is exactly this, that they are able to show that in Wasserstein distance W2, it converges to a certain Gaussian. And so the conclusion is just you need to make a careful estimate. Again, you need to truncate, you need to do things, but the restrictions that I put at the beginning on P comes from here, comes from this result. In fact, in the paper of Lambert, Ledoux, Webb, the potential V, which is for us V of x was x to power p here. The potential V has to be C6. Okay, so this is why I claim that P has to be larger than 6. And also there is a work of Johansson who proved it for any even polynomial. So when P equals 4, this is x to the 4, no problem. It is an even polynomial and it works. But each of these proofs are long. The paper of Lambert, Ledoux, Webb is 80 pages, and it is really half of the paper is needed. And it is based on the paper of Bourgade, Erdős, and Yao about edge universality of beta ensemble, which is also 90 pages. And the proof of the main results that is needed in Lambert, Ledoux, Webb is really at the end and is about 10 pages at the end of the paper. So for the moment, we didn't see, because our potential is much simpler here, but we didn't see how to improve the argument and to prove it. Okay, thank you very much.